Welcome Pythoneer to your third Python tutorial. Now in the last video we downloaded and then installed our IDE, which is PyCharm. In this video we take a look at Python variables. So what are variables? Okay, now in programming, okay, you are basically working with data. Okay, so you are storing the value of, let's say, pi, the value of acceleration due to gravity. You are storing the value of an interest rate, and then so on. Okay, so these are all data that will exist on your computer. So it's important that you are able to take them and then use them later on after you have created them. And so that is what variables that variable does. Okay, so they point or they reference to the value or data in memory. Okay, so they are referred to as pointers or references. So every variable or item in Python has a type. Okay, so you need to know the type so that you know the kind of operations that data can be involved in. Okay, so there are things that you can do with a value or a number like 1, 2, 3, and there are things that you can also do with something like text. Okay, so like name and Stephen Free and then so on. Okay, now in as much as you can perform mathematical operations on numbers, you may not be able to do that on string or text data. So knowing the type of this data is very important. So let's switch to our code, our PyCharm. Okay, and let's start writing some code. Okay, so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to delete this main.py file from our previous tutorial. Okay, so I am going to delete that. Okay, now what I'm going to do is that I can create a new project. We looked at that in the previous video, but we are going to work with this project. Okay, so I'll keep this project. You can create any project that you want. So a project is basically a container that stores all the associated codes that you need to create your program or your app. So we'll need a Python file to be able to start writing our code. So I can just go to file and I'll go to new, and then I will select Python file. So I'll give it a name and then I'll call it variables. Okay, I'll call it variables-3. Okay, so I can just do enter. Okay, so you can call it any name that you want. So before I start writing my code, there is something that I want us to do. Okay, so PyCharm has this inbuilt feature, okay, that tries to check for grammar and spellings, typos, and then so on. And I don't desire this feature. Okay, so I because it can sometimes be a bit confusing as it tries to underline almost every string or whatever text that you create because it doesn't understand it. So what I'll do is I'll go to file, I'll go to settings, and then I will select editor. So I'll expand editor, and then I'll go to inspections. Okay, so once I do that, I will go to proofreading. Okay, so I am going to, so initially it is check. Okay, so you have grammar, natural language, and then typo check. Okay, so I'm going to uncheck grammar and then I'm going to uncheck type. I'll leave this natural language detection for now. Okay, and then I'll do apply, and then I would say okay. Okay, so this remove that default behavior. Okay, so let's start by creating some data. Okay, so I would say gravity is equals to 9.8. Okay, I could say age is equals to 16. Then I could also say name is equals to Stephen Free. So to know the type that's the type that this data belongs to, okay, there is an inbuilt function in Python called type. Okay, so the type tells us the identity or the class that the data or the variable belong to. So everything in Python is based on the ideas of objects and classes. So the class is the identity of every item or every data. So whenever we create a new data like gravity, age, and the name, they are referred to as objects and they belong to a class. Okay, so to know the type or the class, you can just use the type function, and then I can specify, let's say, gravity. Okay, so to output that, I need to use a print. Okay, so print is a function in Python that prints an output. Okay, in Python. Then I can also do the same for name and then gravity. Okay, so name and then age and then name. Sorry, so I'll do for age and then I also do for name. Okay, so to run that, I will go to run Okay, I'll go to run. And then I'm not going to run this main. This is what you are going to see, but our file, it's not main. Our file is called variables. Okay, so this is what I'm going to run. So I'll go to run. So I'll go to run here. Okay, and then I will specify variables. Okay, so it runs. Okay, so it tells me that gravity is of class float, age is of class integer, and then name is of class string. Okay, so these are all types. Okay, in Python, and by knowing what these types are, is going to be useful in writing your code. So in Python, you don't have to determine the type. Okay, so Python would determine the type, okay, of your data after you have created it. So if I say x is equals to 5, by assigning x to 5, Python is able to determine that 5 is an integer. Okay, x is equal to 3.0, Python is able to determine that this is actually a float. Okay, but there is a behavior. Okay, so there is something that you can do, okay, to force data, okay, to belong to a particular type. Okay, so 3.0, it's actually a float, okay, because it has these precision values, but I can force it, okay, to be an integer type. And this approach, okay, is referred to as casting. So it ignores the default type in Python, and then it assigns it the new type that you are specifying. So let's look at that. Okay, so gravity is 9.8, okay, which is a float. Okay, but I can force gravity, okay, to be an int. So the way I do that is to use the int function, okay, around my value. Okay, and I'll comment this 2 lines of code here. So now when I run my program, it's telling me that gravity, which used to be a float, is now an int. Okay, so to further prove that, I can go ahead and print. Okay, I can go ahead and print the value of gravity. Okay, and then notice that it's going to give me 9. So what it does is that it eliminates, or it takes away all the floating the decimal place values. Okay, so you can use that behavior. Okay, you can apply that on, let's say, age, and then I can simply say that change it to a float, cast that to a float, and then I'm going to print age. Okay, I'll print age, the type of age. Okay, so when I run the type of age, okay, so when I run the type of age, okay, so age, which is 16, okay, is now being referred to as a float. So I can prove that. Okay, I can prove that by printing the actual value of age. Okay, so I can run the actual value of age, and then it has 0.028 to convert it to a float. So you can convert, okay, from certain data types to others, but you will not be able to do that in other data types. And we'll see a lot of examples. Okay, we'll see a lot of examples, okay, as we go along. Now, variables are also case sensitive. Okay, so what that means is that gravity, okay, or let me say age, okay, is not the same thing as, okay, age with a different case. Okay, so if I want to print the value of age and then I specify this, so if I try to run, Python will throw an error and will tell me that name age is not defined. Okay, so this is one important rule in Python that you need to stick to. So Python is case sensitive. I mean, variables are case sensitive. Okay, then what if I want to assign all these values, okay, on one line? Okay, there is a way that you can do that. Okay, so instead of creating each variable on each line, I can assign it, okay, I can create the variables and assign all the values in one line. Now this is referred to as multi-variables. Okay, so I can have multi-variables. I can say gravity, and then I can say age. Okay, so age, then I can say name. Okay, it's equals to, let's say, 9.8, 16, and then name Stephen Efriye respectively. Okay, so Stephen. Okay, so I can print gravity, and then print age, and then print name. Okay, so let's run and see what happens. Okay, so we have 9.8, 16, and then Stephen Efriye. So I can use this, I can separate my print output with commas, okay, to print them. Okay, so I can use that to print them. So notice that I didn't have to create each variable on a different line. The rule is to ensure that the left hand assignment, which is the variable, is the same, the number is the same as the right hand assignment, which is the value. Okay, so apart from that, what if say you have three variables? Okay, you have x, you have y, and then you have z. Now each of these variables is supposed to point to the same value. So let's say 16, okay, and then 16, and then 16. Okay, so when I run this, let me print this. So I'll print x, y, and then z. Okay, so I'll print this, and then I should get 16, 16, 16. But why do you have to repeat this? Okay, so I can just assign it to just one of them. Okay, and then when I run this, sorry, so I have to do this. X is equals to y, okay, and then it's equal to 16. Let me print it again. So you get 16, 16, 16. So this is referred to as assignment chaining. Okay, it's referred to as assignment chaining. Okay, so you can chain assignments. So you can assign two or more variables to the same value in Python, okay, for some purpose. So this is also a very useful implementation, but you just have to ensure that you don't go overboard, as if you are chain so many variables, okay, sometimes it can create some confusion in your program. Okay, so let's talk about variable naming. Okay, so all along we have been creating variables like name, x, and then y. Okay, but there are cases where when your program is large, you may be creating several variable names. Okay, so you may be having things like full name, house address, and then all that. So how do you write this, okay, to make it readable? Python has some naming conventions. Okay, Python has some naming conventions which allows us to name our variables. Now the first naming convention is what we refer to as camel casing. Okay, so something like house address. Okay, so if I want to write house address, okay, so writing something like house address can be very difficult to read, okay, because you don't know which word is which word. Okay, so if you are adding two or more words as a way to create a variable name, then when you use the camel casing, the rule says that for the first word, in my case, which is house, everything should be small, lowercase, and for every other word, the first letter in that word should be an uppercase, and then the rest should be a lowercase. So you have this. Okay, so house address is equals to, let's say, 12, let's say Shiashi Street. Okay, so this makes sense. Okay, so this is referred to as camel casing. Okay, so the second naming convention is what we refer to as the Pascal casing. So the Pascal casing, the rule says that each word should begin with a uppercase, and then the rest of the words should be a lowercase. So the rest of the letters in the word should be a lowercase. So in the case of house address, I could have something like house and then address. Okay, house address. Okay, and then so on. Okay, so house address is equals to this. Okay, so you can have this. Okay, so what if you have three words? So you can have country, let's say phone number. Okay, and then so on. Now the last naming convention is what we refer to as the snake casing. So the rule says that every word in a snake casing, okay, in your variable naming should be lowercase, but separate each word with an underscore. So you can have something like house address. Okay, country phone number. Okay, country phone number. So I can have 233. Okay, so now notice that these names like house address are stored in quotation marks. Okay, so these are string data types, and string data types have to be stored in quotation. The quotation can either be a double or a single. So we talk about it more in the string section under types. Okay, so you can basically do that. Now So that is the naming convention. So it is up to you to pick and then adopt to any naming convention of your choice. So lastly, let's talk about reserved keywords. Okay, so as we kept writing our code, we realized that we're using names like print and then so on, type. Okay, so these are referred to as reserved keywords in Python, and the rule is that do not use these keywords in any of your codes other than its main intention. So these are reserved for Python's own internal use. Okay, so for instance, let's say I say print, I want to store a value called print. Okay, and I will say print maybe Steven. Okay, so Python straight away would throw an error if I try to print this. Okay, so print is equals to Steven. Okay, so if let's say I try to print, okay, if I try to print, okay, so it's going to give me an error. Okay, I'm trying to print this, it's going to give me an error because this is a reserved keyword. Okay, so it's a built-in name and you don't have to use it for any other thing. So things like let's say type. Okay, so these are all reserved keywords. Now you don't need to spend time learning about reserved keywords. Okay, you get to identify them as you keep on writing more and then more codes. Okay, so thank you guys for being part of this video, and then I'll see you in the next lesson.